During our sophomore year of college, Shannon and I met and were immediately drawn to each other. She sported luxurious auburn hair and blue eyes, a beautiful face, and a slender figure with long legs. In a single word, she was perfect, at least to me. Despite her striking looks, it was her personality that truly captivated me. She was smart, lively, and a blast to be around. I found myself able to chat with her for hours on any topic. Shannon and I were inseparable, and after dating for 3 months, she gave me her innocence in the back seat of my car, parked behind the town baseball diamond. It was the most incredible moment of my life up to that point. Since then, I never doubted that Shannon and I would be together forever, at least for 10 years. I go by Stu, short for Stuart Gray, and I come from a decent-sized town in the Midwest. Standing at 6 feet tall and weighing 187 pounds, I'm considered reasonably attractive with brown eyes and sandy hair. I work as a contractor, running my own small company with a team of 5 employees. We specialize in interior upgrades for clients who can afford our services, and our work is well regarded. Shannon is a music teacher at the local high school, and together we lead a comfortable life. In our early 30s, we're eager to start a family soon. For the past 10 years of our marriage, Shannon and I have been incredibly happy. While I won't exaggerate and claim we were intimate twice a day, every day, we made love about 3 times a week, always tender and passionate. Every night we cuddled without fail, and every morning waking up beside Shannon, I felt blessed to have her as my wife. I can honestly say that I'd give my life for her without a second thought, even though I'd much rather spend every day by her side. I realize now that I should have said that last statement in the past tense. Suddenly, something blindsided me, something so unexpected and emotionally overwhelming that even now, I can't say I've fully recovered from it. As a contractor in the Midwest, our work mainly happens during the spring, summer, and autumn months. People prefer not to have their homes torn apart when it's freezing cold outside with 3 feet of snow on the ground. That's why Shannon and I usually took vacations around the Christmas and New Year's holidays or during spring break. In the summer, when I was busy working, Shannon sometimes visited her parents for a week, went shopping with her sisters, or attended summer classes to keep her teaching credentials up to date. Our favorite winter getaway was to a warm destination, and that fateful winter, we chose an all-inclusive resort in the Bahamas. It was supposed to be 2 weeks of paradise for us to reconnect in body and spirit. Little did I know how wrong I was. Before we boarded the plane in Minneapolis, I had no inkling that anything was wrong in our marriage. If someone had suggested otherwise, I would have called them a liar and spat in their face. In my eyes, Shannon and I were the perfect couple, deeply in love and inseparable. Our bond was so strong that it felt like we were one person in 2 bodies. I forgot that there could be troubles ahead, that there was a dark side to our relationship. Unbeknownst to me, I was on the edge of a precipice, about to plunge into a fiery abyss. The first sign that something might be off came at the security check-in at Minneapolis, St. Paul International Airport. The line was long, with many people eager to escape the extreme cold for warmer tropical destinations. While waiting to go through the scanners, I noticed a man in the adjacent line glancing at Shannon. Now, Shannon often catches the eye of men with her striking appearance, but this seemed different. It felt like he was trying to get her attention. I pretended to check my boarding pass while keeping an eye on him. His glances toward Shannon were sly, and then I saw it. Shannon glanced back at him and made a subtle gesture as if saying, "Not now." He smiled and nodded, and I was taken aback. I realized then that they knew each other. How well, I wasn't sure, but that realization set off alarm bells. As we went through security, I observed them closely, but there were no further attempts at contact from either of them. I became quiet, hoping Shannon wouldn't notice, but she seemed lost in thought. I hoped the man wasn't on our flight, but when we boarded and took our seats, I saw I was wrong. He was sitting in an aisle seat about 15 rows ahead of us. It struck me as odd that Shannon chose the aisle seat in our row. She usually prefers the window seat, but not this time. I asked her why, since I had pre-booked the window seat for her, giving myself the middle seat, but she just said she wasn't feeling well and didn't want to disturb anyone if she needed to use the restroom. I asked the person in the aisle seat if they minded switching to the window seat, explaining my wife's stomach issues, and they agreed without hesitation. Normally, I can sleep easily on a plane, especially during long flights like the one from Minneapolis to Miami, but in my heightened state of anxiety, sleep was out of the question, even though I pretended otherwise. We stored our carry-on bags in the overhead bin, and Shannon placed her purse under the seat in front of her. Once the plane took off, I put on my twins' baseball cap, pulled it down over my forehead, and pretended to doze off. I left myself enough room to keep an eye on Shannon. About 15 minutes later, she glanced down at me and, thinking I was asleep, got up and headed toward the restrooms. I shifted in my seat to see the whole aisle, and noticed that as she passed the guy's seat, who I now assumed was her acquaintance, she reached out as if to steady herself and briefly touched his shoulder. It was more evidence that something was going on between them, and this wasn't just a coincidence. I saw that they didn't exchange looks, and Shannon went to the restroom. When she came out a little later, she looked directly at him, and he stood up and walked toward her. When they met in the aisle, instead of one of them stepping aside, they faced each other and paused briefly. He put his hand on her waist, she touched his chest for a moment, and they both smiled warmly. As she returned to her seat, his hand slid down to her buttocks, making Shannon smile again. That was all I needed to understand that they knew each other well and were obviously involved at some level. At the same time, it hit me hard that my wonderful marriage was in jeopardy and might be over. I felt so much pain and confusion that I had to turn away from Shannon as she sat down and fastened her seatbelt. How could she do this to us? How long had this been happening? Who was this man, and how far had they gone? For the rest of the flight, I tried to make sense of what I saw and hoped that he wouldn't be on our flight to Nassau, but deep down I knew he would be. To my dismay, I was right. As soon as Shannon and I got on the plane, I saw him sitting 5 rows behind us, reading the in-flight magazine, paying no attention to us. Shannon, now apparently feeling better, took her usual window seat. The flight to Nassau was uneventful, and after landing we got our luggage, rented a car, and headed to the resort. Shannon was texting while I drove, so I asked her, "Who are you messaging?" "Oh, just my mom and sisters letting them know we arrived," she replied. Yeah, I thought, but I'd really like to see it for myself. Isn't it weird how suspicions just keep growing? Our room looked amazing with a balcony, ocean view, and a view of one of the pools. While we unpacked, I knew I needed to make a statement to win back my wife. So, I walked up to Shannon, hugged her, and kissed her neck. "Do you know how much I love you?" Shannon turned to me and gave me a quick kiss on the lips. "I love you too, baby," she said. There was a strange look in her eyes, like she wasn't fully there with me in the room. It gave me chills. I kissed her again. "You know I'd never do anything to hurt you, right, Shannon?" She flinched a bit. "I know that, Stu. And I know you'd never do anything to hurt me or our marriage," I said. She flinched again, and I saw tears welling up in her eyes. "Of course, Stu. You know I wouldn't," she said, unable to meet my gaze, staring at the floor. That's when I realized I was probably losing the battle. If she hadn't already cheated on me, I knew she'd soon be with someone else. I let go of her and hurried to the bathroom, hoping I wouldn't break down before I got there. I stayed in the bathroom for a while, trying to compose myself, asking the same questions over and over. How did this happen? What did I do to drive her away? Why didn't I notice something sooner? But the most important question, what can I do to save us, or is it already too late? After washing my face, I walked out of the bathroom. Shannon was there with a strange expression. "Oh my God, Stu, I just got my period and I didn't bring any tampons." "What?" I said. "My period, Stu, it just started." "But you just had it a week ago. How could it start again?" "I don't know, but it happens sometimes. Maybe the excitement of the vacation triggered it." "I need to go to the gift shop and get some tampons," she said, leaving and closing the door behind her. My first thought was, maybe it's a good thing. It might slow down her romance with her boyfriend, whoever he is. But then I thought, wait, that doesn't make sense. It's never happened before, and she's always been regular with her periods thanks to the pill. Why would she lie about this? Unless she thought having her period would stop me from wanting closeness, so she could focus all her love and passion on her new man. That must be it. And if it is, then she's not the woman I married. No one could be that sneaky and cruel. She must really despise me to let me plan and pay for this trip, just so she could shut me out and give everything to a man I've never even met. I felt completely lost, like I was going crazy. Who was this woman that I'd loved for over 10 years? Looking around the room, I noticed she'd left her phone next to the TV. I turned it on, unsure if she changed the passcode, but she hadn't. Another mistake on her part. I checked her messages and read the latest ones from someone named Anthony Eisner. I scrolled back to the beginning of their conversation, which started when we were driving to the resort. Anthony: "Hey baby, OMG, you look amazing. Can't wait to be with you." Shannon: "You naughty boy, you almost got us caught by Stu at the airport." Anthony: "Couldn't resist, Shan. Almost kissed you on the plane when we were in the aisle. Shannon. Stu was fast asleep, so you could have, but it might have looked bad to others. I did enjoy the little squeeze you gave my butt. A sneak peek of what's to come. LOL. Gotta go, we're almost there. Their conversation continued after we reached our room at the resort. Anthony. I'm in the lobby. Are you here yet? Shannon. In my room. Stu's in the bathroom. He's acting strange. Anthony. Who cares? When are you leaving Stu so I can have you all to myself? Shannon. I've told you from the start that I can't and won't do that, Tony. Stu is a wonderful husband. He loves me, takes care of me, and gives me a life you never could. Anthony. But my Johnson is bigger and better than his, and I do it better than he does. Shannon. Oh yes. No one satisfies me like you do, baby. You know that. You take me to places Stu has never even imagined taking me. Stu and I are planning to start our family, so these next 2 weeks are just for you, baby. I told Stu I would stop taking my birth control pills when we get home, but I actually stopped taking them almost 3 weeks ago. So now you have the opportunity to impregnate me. If you can conceive a child with me in the next 2 weeks, then we'll have a baby that Stu will raise thinking it's his. Anthony. You're so naughty, Shan, but I love it. I'll make a baby in that sweet belly of yours. Shannon. God, you're turning me on. I can't wait to feel you inside me. Anthony. What about Stu, though? How do you know he won't fertilize you in the next 2 weeks? Shannon. Because he's not going to have closeness with me, silly. I'm going to tell him that my period just started again, and oddly, it's going to continue throughout our entire vacation. LOL, Anthony. Are you sure he'll believe it? Shannon. Absolutely. He loves me, and he knows I'd never deceive him. Plus, I'll make it up to him when we get back home. Anthony. Damn, he's so stupid. What a loser. Shannon. Quit calling him that, or you'll be the one losing out. You'll lose access to my affection for good. Anthony. We both know you won't let that happen. You need me too much. Shannon. That's true, but I still don't appreciate you talking about Stu like that. He's a good guy. Anthony. All right, meet me in the lobby. I need to kiss your lips, both sets of them, but I'll settle for the ones on your face for now. I stood there stunned, contemplating whether I could use those messages as evidence in the divorce. Initially, I considered swapping her phone with mine, but then I thought, screw her. My phone holds all my personal data. She's created this mess. Let her find her own way out of it. So, I held on to both phones. I knew she'd notice her phone missing soon, but by then, I'd be long gone. I felt a wave of nausea rising in my throat, choking me. I walked to the window and looked out at the stunning Caribbean scenery. Just 8 hours ago, I was the happiest man alive, looking forward to 2 weeks of romance in the tropical sun with the woman I loved, my wife, my partner in life. And now my world is shattered around me. I've never felt so alone, shocked, and furious in all my life. I had this burning desire to hurt them both, to completely ruin them for making me look like a complete idiot. Thankfully, the logical part of my brain kicked in slowly. Divorce was inevitable. There was no way I could stay married to the cheating woman who had once been my loving wife. But I wanted more than just divorce. I craved revenge. While staring out the window, I happened to glance down at the pool, and there they were, wrapped up in each other's arms, lost in a heated kiss. Anthony's hand slid down to grab Shannon's rear, and she lifted her leg, pressing herself against him. It made me want to vomit, but instead, I took a deep breath and grabbed my video camera that I had bought for the trip, but now found a different use for it. Shannon must not have noticed the pool from our room window while unpacking. The camera had a decent zoom, allowing me to capture close-ups of their intimate moments. It sickened me to watch, but I knew I could use it against them later. I needed a plan, and fast, but my stomach was churning, and my mind felt paralyzed. Then it hit me. How would they find time alone if I was around? They must have a way to keep me occupied while they enjoyed their affair. As I pondered this, a simple idea came to mind. Shannon wanted 2 weeks with her lover, Anthony, to conceive a baby, and I wanted revenge. So why wait? Why not take action now and ruin their plans? First, I needed to figure out how they'd distract me while they were busy. I kept recording as I watched them share one final kiss before Shannon hurried off. She'd be back any minute, and I needed to get myself together. So I headed back to the bathroom and turned on the shower to calm my nerves. If she asked, I'd just say it helps me relax after the flight and get rid of that plane smell. 5 minutes later, I heard the door to our room open and close. "I'm back," she called out. "I got us some water and my tampons." Great, I'll be out of the shower in a minute. Why did she bother getting water when the resort already provides it in every room? Then it hit me. She was planning to drug me. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. If I refused the water, she'd know something was up. But if I drank it, they'd have their time together while I was out. What was my move? I shut off the shower and dried off slowly, my mind spinning. Then Shannon knocked on the door. "You okay in there? You've been in for a while," she said, sounding concerned. I couldn't tell if she was worried about me or just anxious to get to her rendezvous. My anger surged, but I kept my cool as I opened the door and saw her by the bed, drinking from a water bottle. She handed me another one, already opened. "Here, we need to stay hydrated with the change in climate," she said, avoiding my gaze. I took the bottle and pretended to take a big gulp before heading back into the bathroom. Quietly, I spit the water into the sink and emptied the bottle. Grabbing one from the bathroom counter, I refilled it. Back in the room, Shannon was unpacking, so I doubted she saw me. Continuing to sip my water, I glanced around and noticed a red dress laid out. "Is that for dinner? Seems a shame if we can't, I hinted, knowing it was for him, not me. "I brought it, so might as well wear it," she replied, smiling. "Aren't you tired from traveling?" Bingo. She did drug my water, but how to handle it? I needed more proof, so I pretended to feel sleepy, taking another sip. It felt like I downed a bunch of Red Bulls. My heart was racing. I fought to appear tired. "Now that you mention it, I could use a rest." "What time's dinner?" I asked, trying to sound sleepy. "Not for a couple of hours. Why don't you lie down?" "I'll wake you when it's time," she said, seeming genuine. I let out a yawn. "All right, honey, I'll take a nap. Just don't let me oversleep. I want to be with you as much as possible. Love you so much." I noticed her reaction like I'd touched a nerve. "I love you too," she replied less convincingly. I lay down, pretending to drift off slowly. Soon I was snoring softly and I heard Shannon make a call. "It worked. He's out. How long will he stay asleep?" "We've got the whole night," she giggled. It made me sick, but I stayed still, pretending to sleep. "I'll meet you at the Sandpiper bar in an hour. Need to freshen up." She laughed. "You're so bad. Can't wait, lover. Bye." She hung up and got ready for her evening. I watched her with barely open eyes as she chose her lingerie, a thong and push-up bra. My anger boiled inside, but I kept up the act. She headed into the bathroom, starting the shower. I knew she'd be in there a while, so I seized the chance to search her purse. I found a pill bottle with unmarked capsules inside. Carefully, I took out 5 pills, wrapped them in a tissue, and hid them in my pocket. I put the bottle back and returned to bed just as I heard her finish showering. She took another 45 minutes to get ready, and as soon as she left, I sprang into action. I had a plan. Get more video evidence, ruin their trip, and start divorce proceedings early to beat her to it. I grabbed the camera and headed to the bar, ready to catch them in the act. The resort wasn't huge, just 2 bars by the ocean, but the Sandpiper was the bigger one with a dance floor. I found a good spot behind some palm trees where I could see into the bar without being seen. The zoom on my camera got some great footage. It wasn't too busy, which made it easy to spot them. She wore that red dress I used to love. Now it just made me furious. He had his hands all over her, and I had to fight the urge to go over there and knock him out. I had to remind myself I was there for evidence, not to end up in jail. I started recording as they acted like lovers on a Caribbean getaway. They laughed, touched, and kissed, just like Shannon and I used to. After about an hour, a DJ started playing music, and they danced. Watching them made me sick, and I almost left for our room, my room, alone. Then I saw them leave the dance floor quickly, so I followed, keeping my distance. They stopped to kiss and touch as I recorded. They reached his room at the back of the resort, smaller and ground floor with no ocean view. He must be on a budget, I thought. They went inside and I got closer to hear and record everything they said. He left the lights on, and I captured every moment as they undressed and got intimate. I noticed he was well endowed, but that didn't excuse her cheating or letting him get her pregnant with my child. I kept watch outside his room, recording their lovemaking for what felt like an eternity. This guy wasn't just well endowed. He had quite a bit of stamina, too. It was almost midnight, and I thought she'd leave him to be with me soon, but then I overheard their conversation. "Are those pills safe? I don't want him passing or having a seizure," she asked, sounding concerned. "How touching." "Don't worry, babe. He'll be asleep for at least 6 more hours. He might wake up with a headache, but that's it. You only used 1 pill, right?" "Yeah, just 1. Why? What would happen with 2? I don't want to risk an overdose." The jerk laughed. "Nah, 2 would knock him out for like 12 hours or more. Just stick to 1 before bedtime and we can spend every night together. I want you pregnant before we leave. Here's an extra key card to my room. If you can sneak away from him during the day, call me, and we'll meet up here." Then they both laughed, and it filled me with rage, making me vomit. Having seen and heard enough, I quietly left and made my way back to my room. Now I needed to plan how to destroy them both and make them feel the pain they caused me. It was clear she wanted to spend every night with him, so I had to change that. Back in my room, I reviewed the recordings. As difficult as it was to watch, I began forming a plan to ruin their fun. First, I needed to find a way to separate them so I could spy on Loverboy. Maybe I'd get him alone, even drug him like Shannon did to me, then beat him up while he was out cold. He wouldn't be able to identify me, so I'd get away with it. The question was, how could I ensure they'd be apart? Then it hit me. I'd treat Shannon to a day at the spa. The resort had a spa with massages, facials, and makeup services. I planned to buy her a package deal as a gift to show my love. If she refused, I'd guilt trip her into accepting, just like she had done to me before. She wouldn't have a choice but to accept, and it would keep her busy for a couple of hours while I took care of business with Loverboy. I changed into my shorts and lay awake in bed, thinking about them together and the beating I'd give him. Around 5 a.m., Shannon returned to the room. I stayed still as if asleep while she crawled into bed beside me. At 7 a.m., I pretended to wake up. Shannon was still asleep, so I showered quickly and headed to the spa. The spa was open early, and I chose a package that lasted about 3 hours. The earliest booking was at 2 p.m., so I took it to surprise my wife. Afterward, I explored the grounds and returned to the room around 9 a.m. Shannon was still asleep, so I checked her phone. There was a recent message from him. "Anthony, you were great last night. Any chance you can sneak away from Stu for some afternoon fun?" I controlled my anger and kissed Shannon's forehead as she started to stir. "Morning. Sorry about yesterday, falling asleep like that and messing up our dinner plans, but I have a surprise for you." She smiled and yawned. "What's the surprise?" "I booked you a spa day to make up for last night and to show you how much I care." Even in her sleepy state, I noticed a slight flinch and uncertainty in her eyes. It made me realize she might be questioning her feelings for me. I looked at her. "Is everything okay? Do you like the gift?" "I do love it. I just wish you had asked me first." She gave a weak smile. "If I did that, it wouldn't be much of a surprise. You don't have to rush to the spa right now. I scheduled it for 2 p.m. this afternoon, so we can spend time together. Okay?" She nodded. "You're thoughtful. Thank you." As she kissed my cheek, I thought I smelled something fishy on her breath. What a deceitful person. "Get cleaned up and we'll grab breakfast," I said as I got off the bed while she headed to the bathroom with her purse. I knew what she was doing, but didn't want to raise suspicion, so I glanced out the window and saw Anthony by the pool, chatting with a couple of women while checking his phone. He seemed unfazed by my surprise gift. It crossed my mind that he might be making backup plans in case Shannon couldn't make it for some afternoon fun. That could come in handy. About an hour later, Shannon and I were at the breakfast buffet filling our plates. Well, I was filling mine. She just grabbed some fruit and coffee. "Not hungry, babe? Is it because of your period?" I asked. "Oh yeah, that must be it. I'm not feeling much like eating," she replied, seeming distracted. I couldn't help but wonder what Anthony said in his text, because it seemed to be bothering her. Well, it didn't really matter since my plan seemed to be working on them, or at least on her. After breakfast, we decided to walk on the beach and check out the ocean. I had my camera with me and was taking videos of the beach, palm trees, and Shannon. She would smile politely and I'd compliment her beauty and future motherhood. Then came that flinch, that look of uncertainty and guilt on her face. "What's wrong, babe? Are you okay?" I knew her guilt was getting to her. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. Do you mind if I go back to the room for a nap before my spa appointment?" "Sure, no problem. I know it can't be much fun being on vacation and having your period. You go rest, and I'll see you back at the room after your spa treatment." "That'll do you good," I reassured her. She turned and headed back to the resort without even saying goodbye. Well, I'd be kicking her to the curb soon. Now I just had to find Anthony and make him pay. Lost in my thoughts as I walked along the beach, I saw two couples approaching. The women were the same ones I saw with Anthony earlier. This time, they were with two big guys who looked like they could play football for the Vikings. As I got closer, I overheard their conversation. "Come on, babe, don't be like that. You knew Dave and I wanted to go deep-sea fishing, and they had 2 spots open. We'll be back before dinner," one of the guys said. "Sure, you guys always do whatever you want while we're stuck here at the hotel," one of the women replied. Babe, there's plenty for you to do here. You could go shopping in town, relax by the pool or beach, or even use the gym they have, the guy suggested. Are you saying I'm fat? You're one to talk, she retorted. No, babe, that's not what I meant. I just meant you could find plenty of stuff to do here, he said, trying to explain himself. I knew it was a lost cause as they walked past me heading back to the resort. He kept pleading his case, but it didn't seem to make a difference. After wandering on the beach for a while, I decided to go back and see what Loverboy was doing. I was worried Shannon might have skipped her spa appointment to be with him, but if she did, maybe I could get more footage of them together. I roamed around the resort for over an hour until I found myself outside Anthony's room. I could hear voices inside, but not Shannon's. Carefully, I got my camera ready and moved closer to the window. It was risky, since it was daytime and more people could see me. I decided to set the camera on the window ledge outside, aimed into the room, and let it record on its own. Then I found a spot where I could watch his door and see who came out. Time passed slowly, but my patience paid off. The two women I saw with Anthony earlier walked out of his room, smiling and giggling. Once they were out of sight, I grabbed the camera and headed back to my room. Shannon wouldn't be back from her spa treatment for almost an hour, so I had time to review the recordings. Back in the room, I pulled out my laptop and downloaded all the videos I had recorded since we arrived. Most of it was of Shannon and Anthony, but then I watched what I just recorded with those two girls in his room. They ended up having a three-way with Anthony. It was like watching a low-budget X movie. He'd be with one while the other watched and played with herself. Then they'd switch. They even commented on how much bigger he was than their boyfriends. Another idea hit me. And if I timed it right, I'd be back home while Shannon tried to figure out what happened. I figured she'd try to drug me again tonight, so I'd play along and pretend to be knocked out cold. Then, if I was lucky, she'd meet Anthony at the bar to dance and drink before going back to his room. If I could slip one of those pills into each of their drinks near the end of their night at the bar, they'd be out cold by the time they got to his room. Timing had to be perfect, but things hardly ever go exactly as planned in life. The next step was to make a DVR copy of Anthony's recent escapades. I have to admit, I was a little jealous of the guy for being able to persuade two good-looking women to join him. I made 2 copies of his afternoon activities on DVR discs. Now I just needed to figure out which rooms to leave them in. I also made a backup copy of everything I recorded on another DVR for insurance. I went down to the front desk and mailed that disc to my brother Frank back home with a note asking him not to play it or let anyone know I sent it to him. It was just in case my plan backfired, or Shannon and Anthony found out what I was up to and wanted to harm me. If something happened to me, at least that disc I sent to my brother would show who was behind it. Checking the time, I saw Shannon should be finishing up at the spa soon, so I decided to take a quick walk around the resort to find out which rooms those two women and their boyfriends were staying in. I'm sure their boyfriends would be quite interested in what they were up to while they were deep-sea fishing. Soon, I spotted the 2 women I was looking for walking up from the pool area, each with their towels. As I followed, I knew they were heading back to their rooms, and sure enough, I saw them enter separate rooms next to each other. That took care of one part of my plan. Now, if things went as planned and Shannon and Anthony followed the same routine as the night before, I could completely ruin the rest of the trip by tomorrow morning. I went back to the room to call the airline and see when the earliest flight out was the following morning. The best I could get was 10 a.m., which was later than I hoped for, but I booked it anyway. Next, I returned to the front desk to inform them that my wife and I had to leave the next morning due to a family emergency back home, and we'd be checking out at 8 a.m. They were sympathetic and wished me the best. I thanked them and headed back to the room. Now I was fully committed to my plan, no matter what obstacles came my way. If things didn't go as planned, I'd still catch the morning flight home and beat Shannon there. Even if I couldn't pull off my scheme, I could mess things up for her before she returned. But if, by some chance, everything went according to my plan, she'd be stranded here for days, maybe weeks, while I wreaked havoc. The plan was pretty straightforward. First, I'd let Shannon think she drugged me and pretend to pass out, giving her and Anthony the chance to spend their evening together. Second, I'd head to the bar again, waiting for the right moment to spike their drinks with what Shannon tried on me. If I timed it right, they'd pass out just before reaching his room or right after getting in. Third, once they were out cold in the room, I'd move Shannon back to ours, then clean out everything from Anthony's possessions: wallet, cash, passport, you name it. Fourth, I'd find the rooms of those two women Anthony had the threesome with and slip the DVR discs under their doors, hoping one of their boyfriends would find and play it. They wouldn't be too thrilled about what their girlfriends were up to while they were away. Anthony's room number was visible in the videos, so they'd know where to find him. Fifth, I'd do the same to Shannon as I did to Anthony, taking everything she brought except her clothes and purse. I'd leave a note in her empty wallet so she knew who did it. With everything set, all I could do was wait for the plan to unfold. Shannon came back to the room at 5:30 p.m., looking more relaxed and radiant than ever. It pained me to think our marriage was over and I'd never be with her again. "Stu, thank you so much for the spa day. It was amazing. I feel like a whole new woman," she said with a glow. "I'm glad you liked it. When I first mentioned it, you didn't seem too excited, but I'm happy you enjoyed it. I just wanted to show you how much I care," I replied, noticing her flinch but also seeing tears in her eyes. "Thank you again. I really loved it. And I love you," she said, this time with more conviction and feeling. "Anytime, babe. We have dinner reservations for 7 p.m. How about we rest up a bit and then get ready?" She nodded and headed to the bathroom with her purse. A few minutes later, she returned with 2 water bottles, handing one to me. "Drink up. I plan on hitting the dance floor tonight, so you better start hydrating," she said, winking at me. All right, just let me hit the bathroom first," I chuckled. Once inside, I repeated the same routine as before, emptying the bottle and refilling it with water from the counter. I flushed the toilet to make it sound convincing, then returned to the bedroom. I kept drinking my water, and after about 15 minutes, I started my sleepy act. Soon enough, I was snoring, pretending to be asleep, while I watched Shannon getting ready for what would turn out to be her final date with Anthony, though she didn't know it. She went into the bathroom and turned on the shower. I quickly got up, grabbed her phone, and checked her messages with Loverboy. Shannon: "Can't slip away this afternoon. Stu bought me a spa package. Couldn't say no." Anthony: "No problem, babe. Got other plans for now. We still on for tonight?" Shannon: "Absolutely. Need that big hard Johnson and its seed for our baby." Anthony: "Can't wait to be between your legs and have you screaming my name." After reading that garbage, my rage wasn't as intense because I knew the end was near. Now all I had to do was follow them to the bar, watch them dance for a few hours, then spike their drinks. Simple. Well, maybe not that simple. I rummaged through her purse and found the key card to Anthony's room. I slipped it into my pocket and put everything back as it was. Shannon took a bit longer to get ready, then did something unexpected. She sat down beside me on the bed and gently touched my cheek. "Baby, after this week, I'll be all yours. I swear it. I just needed to get this out of my system before we start a family. I wish I could have told you and that you'd understand, but I had to do this. These next few days are for me. I wish I could have been honest, but I need you more than you know. I love you so much, but I really needed this," she whispered, kissing my cheek. "I do love you, Stu." At first, I thought she might have figured out I wasn't asleep, but then I realized she was trying to ease her guilty conscience, though it was a little too late for that. She soon left the room all dressed up, and once the door closed, I was up, dressed, and trailing not far behind her. They ended up at the same bar as the night before, which was even more crowded this time. I spotted the 2 women and their boyfriends from the beach earlier that day. If my plan worked, they wouldn't be together by morning. I settled into the same spot as the night before, getting comfortable with my trusty camera to record the evening's events. As predicted, the night unfolded, and soon they were seated at a table chatting and laughing. It was getting late, approaching the time I needed to drug their drinks. I made my way to the bar, ensuring they didn't spot me. Sitting down, I ordered a beer, keeping an eye on them. I noticed their waitress taking their drink order, and then returning to the bar. Luckily, it was her only order. I listened to her instructions to the bartender, then signaled the other bartender for the same drinks. While the first bartender prepared their drinks, I discreetly opened a capsule and added its contents to each drink, stirring to mix it in. The fizz settled, and the drinks looked normal. With a drink in each hand, I maneuvered past the waitress, swapping the drugged ones for the originals. Thankfully, the busy bar hid my actions, and I returned to my spot outside to watch and wait. The waitress delivered their drinks, and I hoped my timing was right. It was just after 1 a.m., so if the pills worked, they'd be out until around 11 a.m., aligning perfectly with my plan. Now, all I needed was for them to finish their drinks and head back to Anthony's room before passing out. They sat there, slowly sipping their drinks, and I began to feel anxious. What if they don't finish their drinks? Will the pills work properly? Then Anthony leaned toward Shannon, whispered something, and they both quickly finished their drinks and left the bar. Thank goodness. I hurried to keep pace with them as they rushed back to the room. This time, I noticed Shannon stumbling and having trouble walking. Anthony supported her, his arm around her waist. By the time they reached his room, Anthony was also starting to stagger. My timing with drugging their drinks had been perfect, so now all I had to do was wait for it to fully kick in. As they reached his door, Shannon could barely stand, and Anthony was stumbling more with each step. He struggled to use his key card, finally managing to open the door and stumble inside. The door closed, so I waited a few minutes before using the key card I took from Shannon's purse to enter the room. As I stepped inside, I heard Anthony's slurred voice. "What's wrong with you, babe? You didn't drink that much." I knew he'd soon be knocked out cold. Approaching the bed, I saw Shannon lying face down, unconscious. Anthony was shaking her, trying to wake her up. "Come on, babe, it's time to make a baby," he said, noticing me walking in. "Hey, who the hell are you?" He tried to straighten up but almost fell over. "I'm just her husband, jerk. Now why don't you do us a favor and pass out so I can take her out of here?" Right on cue, he slowly collapsed to the floor and lay still. Moving closer to the bed, I searched for his phone, which was lying on the floor nearby. I wanted to see what he had on it, like texts and photos. I started scrolling through hundreds of pictures, most of them harmless, until I struck gold. There was a folder with dozens of images of women in various stages of undress, and some were even doing different things with his Johnson. Most of them I didn't recognize, but there were several of Shannon doing similar things. As I kept looking, I realized some of the women were teachers at the same school where Shannon worked, as well as wives of some of the male teachers. Well, that's interesting. It seems Anthony likes to mess around with other men's wives. That was about to come back to bite him. I checked his contact list to see who he had on there, and I decided those pictures, aside from my soon-to-be ex-wife's, should be shared with everyone on his list. It took me a few minutes to tag and send all those pictures to all those people, including some husbands of the wives he had taken pictures of, along with a few videos of those women giving him a blowjob. He was in for a rude awakening when he got home. I sent the pictures and videos of Shannon to her phone, then from her phone to mine. I'd use those later for my own purposes. Blackmail anyone? I turned off his phone and started gathering all his stuff, clothes, toiletries, and anything else he brought on the trip, and shoved them haphazardly into his suitcase. Then I checked his pockets and took all his cash, wallet, credit cards, driver's license, and passport. I knew that without his passport, leaving the island would be tough for him. Once his suitcase was packed, I focused on Shannon. She was still face down on the bed with one leg hanging off. I carefully rolled her onto her back and carried her back to my room. After laying her on our bed, I went back to the jerk's room to collect the rest of his things. I kept his phone, wallet, and cash as some sort of compensation. I made sure he didn't have anything left to take with him, even taking his shoes and tossing them in the resort's dumpster along with his suitcase, covering them with trash to hide them. Back in my room, I packed up both mine and Shannon's suitcases with the same care as I did Anthony's stuff. I planned to leave Shannon with just the clothes on her back, her purse, some tampons, and an empty wallet with a note from me. It was around 4 a.m., and I needed to be at the airport by 9 a.m. Since Shannon had finished her drink around 2 a.m., she'd likely be out until at least noon. I figured Anthony would wake up around 10 a.m., and I'd be long gone by then. Before leaving the room, I grabbed the 2 DVR discs I made earlier and slipped one under each of the doors of the rooms where the 2 women and their boyfriends were staying. Quietly and quickly, I did this and then returned to my room. Seeing Shannon peacefully sleeping on the bed filled me with a deep sense of loss and sadness. I had been looking forward to starting a family with her, but her actions made forgiveness impossible. I made sure everything was packed up in the room, grabbed Shannon's suitcase, and tossed it into the same dumpster where I had thrown Anthony's stuff. Back in the room, I checked Shannon's purse to ensure it was empty, with no money, credit cards, or passport. I wanted to make sure she faced the same difficulty getting home as Anthony. Taking a seat in one of the room's chairs, I felt completely drained. But then I started thinking about my next steps once I got back home. First on the list, drain our bank accounts, pay off and cancel all our credit cards. Then I'd pack up all my belongings and haul them out of our house. I knew I'd probably need to stash them in a storage facility, but honestly, I didn't care. I just needed out of our house, and out of this fake marriage. Before I knew it, I had drifted off, and when I woke up, it was nearly 7 a.m. I forced myself out of the chair, went over to the bed, took one last sorrowful look at Shannon, then carefully scooped her up in my arms and carried her out of the room. Down at the pool, I left her on a lounge chair. Since I was checking out, I didn't want her there when the cleaning crew came around to prep the room for the next guests. Back up in the room, I grabbed my bags, did one final scan to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. I still had Anthony's phone, but then I got an idea. Heading back to the pool, I snatched up Shannon's phone. I started sending all those photos and videos to everyone on her contact list, with a few exceptions. She had some young nieces and nephews who shouldn't see that stuff, but her parents, siblings, and coworkers, they deserved to know. I went to the front desk and asked for a piece of Scotch tape. I took out her phone's battery, put a tiny piece of tape over the contacts, and put the battery back in. It would look like her battery had died, and I made sure she didn't have the charger cord. With no money, it'd take her a while to get her phone up and running. It was just after 8 a.m. when I heard the yelling and screaming. It was coming from one of the boyfriends of the two women I'd seen with Anthony yesterday. Sounded like their soon-to-be exes had watched the video I slipped under their doors. "You cheater! Tell your family the wedding's off. I never want to see you again. Find your own way home, you." One guy was tearing into his girlfriend. The other guy just had this cold, hard look on his face while his girlfriend begged with him. "Please, baby, don't leave me. I'm so sorry. It was a dumb mistake, and you already got even with him," she sobbed. "You're such a tramp. Go back to your new guy. He may have a bigger Johnson, but I doubt it'll be working too well from now on," he said, his tone chilling me with a hint of fear. I wonder what they did to poor old Anthony. Well, I guess I'll never find out. The next thing I heard was the wail of an ambulance pulling up outside. The manager, I presumed, rushed out from his office and hurried the EMTs toward Anthony's room. I really hoped he'd be okay. As onlookers started gathering to see what the fuss was about, I quietly hailed a cab and headed to the airport. I powered on my phone and noticed I had a voicemail. Checking my messages, I heard my brother Frank's voice. "Stu, what's going on down there? I got a bunch of pics and some explicit videos of Shannon. I mean, she's hot, but what's the deal? Do you know anything about this? Call me back when you get this." Sitting at the airport, waiting to board, I called him back and laid out the whole messed up situation. How Shannon was hooking up with Anthony while we were on our vacation, trying to get pregnant by him. At first, my brother thought I was joking, but when I told him to take a closer look at the videos, he was stunned. He apologized for what happened and offered his support. I thanked him, hung up, and soon found myself flying back home alone. When I switched on Anthony's phone after landing, I found a bunch of angry voicemails and texts, threatening him with harm. Guess those pics and vids I sent out didn't sit well. Grabbed my bags, got my car from long-term parking, and headed home, thinking about my next move on the drive. Divorce was an option, but she'd get half, and that didn't sit right with me. Cheats and still comes out ahead in the divorce? Not fair. Another plan started brewing as I drove, so I mentally listed what I'd need and how to pull it off. She wrecked our marriage, so I'd make her life miserable. Called my brother to help move my stuff out before Shannon got back, leaving her an empty house. Checked my phone to find a flood of messages, mostly from Shannon's family asking where she was. No text from Shannon herself meant she hadn't figured it out yet. Smirked at the thought of her discovering the mess she'd made. First, canceled our cards and transferred our money. Packed up my stuff, trashed any gifts from Shannon, and unplugged the house phone. Around 11 p.m., saw Shannon's frantic messages. "Where are you? Why'd you leave me? Are you okay?" Then came the realization. Why did you do this? Couldn't we have talked? I just ignored the rest of her messages, figuring that would just frustrate even her more. The next day was hectic. With no clue when Shannon would return, I had to act fast. First, I grabbed some boxes for my stuff and rented a big storage unit. Then, I hit the bank, draining our joint account and moving the rest to my business account. I thought about closing it and taking off, but there were still loose ends to tie up before I could split for good. Our house was a small starter home. We figured we'd upgrade as our family grew. It was basic. 2 bedrooms, a tiny bathroom, and kitchen. Nothing fancy. I used to dream of fixing it up, but now I had different plans. I was going to give Shannon a homecoming she'd never forget, in a not-so-traditional way. Later that morning, my brother Frank came over with his pickup. After loading up all my stuff, we made 3 trips to the storage unit, taking over 5 hours. By afternoon, I was officially out. I didn't tell Frank about my plans for the house or the surprise for Shannon. Figured he'd try to talk me out of it. He did ask about my future plans, though. I'm just leaving town to escape this nightmare of a marriage. I don't plan on divorcing her, but I won't be here when she returns. She can keep the house, but that's it. Frank shook his head. That won't work. She'll hire a lawyer and find you. Just divorce her and move on. Running will only make things worse when she catches up. Don't let anger and hurt dictate your choices. Be responsible, get a lawyer, and split things evenly. No way. She cheated on me and tried to pass another man's baby off as mine. She gets nothing. I'm not divorcing her. I'm leaving her broke and airing out her dirty laundry. Frank knew arguing was pointless. I'm stubborn when I've made up my mind. He left, advising me not to act rashly, but I'd already made my decision the moment I caught her kissing her lover. Now, it was time to act. That night, I started working on the house and kept at it until the early hours. With no idea when Shannon would return, I had to hustle. The snow was on my side, though. Another big storm was coming, causing airports to close. Flights would be canceled, giving me more time for my project. Plus, the extra snow would help with my plans since there was already a foot on the ground. Ignoring most calls, especially from Shannon, I finally picked up, aiming to gather information from her. She pleaded, admitting her mistake and promising to do anything to make it right. Her tears didn't sway me. I was done with her. But I played it cool, hinting at a slim chance for reconciliation, then yanking it away. Why did you do this to us? Don't you love me? I spoke calmly, but with a touch of sadness, masking my anger. Inside, I wanted to call her names and slam the phone down. But I needed her to think there was hope for us. It meant nothing, baby. Please forgive me, she begged, sobbing. I don't know if we can fix this, I replied after a pause, keeping her hanging on. We can make it through this, and our love will be even stronger, she pleaded, her desperation evident. I'm not sure. When are you coming back? I asked. I'm stuck without a passport or ticket. My sister's wiring me money since my credit cards got stolen. Oh, and cancel those cards, please, she said, switching from begging to practicality in a flash. I'll take care of it. But when do you think you'll be back? I inquired. In a few days, once I get a new passport from the consulate, she answered. Let me know when you're leaving, okay? I requested. I will. Stu? Yeah? I love you. See you when you're back, I replied, hanging up. I figured she wouldn't be back for a few days, which was perfect. It'd give me time to finish up my home improvements and prepare for my new life without her. The next day, Frank called to check in and invited me over for dinner. I agreed, craving a home-cooked meal after living on pizza and Chinese food for over a week. After reassuring Frank that I wouldn't do anything impulsive, Shannon called. Hey, babe, good news. I'll be getting a new passport in a couple of days. All I need now is a plane ticket home. I could be back in a few days, maybe late afternoon. Can you pick me up from the airport? I really want us to talk as soon as I'm back, she said eagerly. I don't think that's a good idea, Shannon. You should have your sister pick you up. We can talk when you arrive, I replied, knowing full well I'd be long gone by then. Okay, babe, I love you, and I know we can work through this if you just give us a chance. Okay, Stu, she pleaded. Yeah, we'll talk when you're back. No promises, I lied, mirroring her deceitful tone. Now that I had a clear idea of when she'd return home, I had time to tie up loose ends before leaving town. Firstly, I sold my work truck and got another one registered in a friend's name. Secondly, I had to inform my employees that I was closing the business due to the impending divorce. It was abrupt, but I had to let them know what was happening. Then, I reached out to an old college buddy in Colorado who had previously suggested we start a business together. He was surprised by the situation with Shannon as he knew us when we were dating and thought we were a perfect match. I asked if his offer was still on the table, and he welcomed me to join him. I requested to work off the books to avoid Shannon finding out my whereabouts and claiming money from me. With everything arranged, all that remained was for me to leave. Shannon had been calling me multiple times a day, apologizing and professing her love, but I was determined to go. The day before her return, I packed my new truck and cleared out the house. I left early the next morning, aiming to leave town unnoticed. I asked my neighbor to record Shannon's arrival, promising a surprise for her without revealing the real reason behind it. He agreed, unaware of our marital issues, and awaited my call the next day. As I drove out of town toward my new life without Shannon, everything was in place. It would take me a couple of days to reach my friend's house down south, and by then, Shannon would be back home. Driving, I felt less angry and more peaceful than I had in the past week. Since seeing Shannon and Anthony together, I felt like my life had hit rock bottom, but now I was starting to climb out of that pit of despair. Around noon, Shannon called to say she'd be home the next day around 4 p.m. She asked if I'd pick her up at the airport, but I told her I had errands to run and would be home after her. I instructed my neighbor to have his video camera ready for the surprise I had planned for my wife. The next day, I was in Colorado, just an hour away from my friend's place, when Shannon called in distress. The house, it collapsed. It must have been the snow. I barely turned the key, and the roof came crashing down. Our house is gone, she cried. Don't worry, Shannon, I've made other arrangements, I reassured her, trying to sound cheerful. How can you be happy about this? Our house is destroyed, she exclaimed, growing angry. Good. My remodeling plan worked as intended. I rigged the house to collapse when she unlocked the door. Using temporary supports in the basement and cutting the floor studs, I set it up so that turning the key activated a winch connected to the front door lock. When she unlocked it, the winch pulled, and down came our house. Well, you see, our house didn't just collapse because of the snow. I had a hand in that. I did to our house what you did to our marriage. Good luck finding a new place to live. As for me, I'm almost at my new home. With that, I hung up on her and called my neighbor. Stu, you won't believe it. Your house just collapsed. It seemed like it couldn't handle the snow, but it didn't look like enough to cause that much damage. Luckily, your wife is okay. She was trying to open the door when it happened, and it just fell in on itself, he exclaimed. I asked him to email me the video when he had a chance. After our conversation, I turned off my phone and continued my drive to start a new life. It's been nearly 3 years since I settled down in Colorado and built a good life for myself. I stay connected with a few friends back in Minnesota to keep up with what's going on. I avoided reaching out to family directly because I was afraid they'd tell Shannon where I was. It turns out Shannon got what she wanted and was pregnant with Anthony's baby. She spread lies, claiming the baby was mine and that I ran away because I couldn't handle being a father. Even my own mother believed her, wanting a grandchild so badly. I had a friend contact my brother, who suggested a DNA test with the baby. If I was the father, it would match my brother closely. If not, there would be no match. Shannon agreed, and the results proved I wasn't the father. My mother kicked her out, furious with her lies. As for Anthony, he got a severe beating from the 2 guys at the resort and ended up hospitalized for over a week. When he got home, more of his ex-husbands were waiting to confront him. He's left town since then, and word is he's lost a testicle. Looks like his player days are over.